Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be looking at a 2025 tornado season forecast. I did post like a minute video of me walking and talking about it. I couldn't really make this video in time, but now I have the time to make it. I deleted that video because it's kind of crappy. Didn't really get any views, but anyway, without further ado, let's get started. So at the beginning of the video, we're going to cover the last year, and then we're going to go to obviously like Tornado Alley and the ingredients, and then we're gonna go to a month by month outlook and then an outbreak and stuff, and then you'll see. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. So let's look at last year. So 2024 was the second most active hurricane season on record. 2011 has us beat by almost 1,000 tornadoes. Not like by 600 tornadoes, but still, it was a very active tornado season, historical for tornadoes. So we can see at the beginning of the year, we are a little below average to below average. But in April and May, we shoot way above the average, about halfway through May. And then we just stay like that for the end of the year, and we get a lot more. We get like 100 more tornadoes towards the end of the year. So a very active tornado season. Will we see that much this year? I kind of doubt it. But you never know, and because of a La Niña, which we'll get to in a bit, which increases tornado activity, it is very, very possible. So obviously, how tornadoes form. So the jet stream dips and it goes into the southwest, into the plains. Cold, dry air from Canada, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, and warm, dry air from Mexico. So all this Canadian dry air, the Mexican warm dry air, and the Gulf of America warm moist air, they'll all combine. And basically what's going to happen is all these ingredients combine with, like, say, a front in Tornado Alley where we have the most amount of tornadoes. Though I will not say that this is definitely not the highest area this year. I will say that this has been shifting south and east, as you've seen. If you want me to make a video on that, I will, if enough of y'all want that, so let me know. But definitely this is not the highest risk area. This is just traditionally where all the ingredients meet, but it can also meet in other areas too. So we've already looked at the Enso forecast, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. But currently we're in a La Niña, and that's going to gradually transition to a neutral, though we are still at like negative 1.1. On the Enso scale. So really, I would not be surprised if we stayed in a La Niña for a while. So obviously, we have different main tornadic months for the top activity areas. So Dixie Alley is the earliest, then it moves into the southern plains and then the northern plains and Midwest. So Dixie Alley, the South Sea, Central Gulf, and North Florida, that's early March to late April, potentially very late February, depending on what ingredients can get together. That moves into the southern plains, which is Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, mid-late April to early June, and then the northern plains and Midwest is mid-June, early August. None of these areas are necessarily a higher risk than others. I mean, Dixie Alley has been getting a lot of bad stuff, just as bad as the Southern Plains has been getting it. And the Midwest, a little bit less. But actually, recent years, they've been getting a lot of tornadoes. So they're just the highest of a risk. I will say, though, that's really only for June. As you get into July and August, there is a tornado threat, but it kind of shifts out of that area. And it lessens a lot. So I do think giving the Northern Plains / Midwest up to early August and July as very generous, if not too generous. Usually their main thing is May to June, but this year it could start a little late, as they do get, recent years, they do get a lot of their severe weather early mid-June. And I remember that because I'm always on summer break when it happens. I mean, I'm not in the Midwest, but yeah. So we are going to look, move myself out of the way here. We're going to see, we're in a La Niña. So La Niña causes a more north jet stream. And basically, what that means is that, last year we saw an El Nino. We saw a lot of severe weather in the southeast, especially Florida. So actually, I did have a very accurate tornado season forecast last year. It was mainly among the Gulf, and actually in Tallahassee here, we saw about, I think it was in Leon County, it was like 6 tornadoes in one day, and 2 of them were EF2s. So that's strong tornadoes. If y'all don't know, strong tornado is EF2 to EF5. Intense is EF3 to EF5, which is like the worst. Violent is EF4 and EF5s, and I think it's like, because EF4s are catastrophic, but I think it's like there's like an I word to describe EF5s. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So, with the Gulf, moisture is limited usually here by El Ninos, but since we're in a La Nina or a neutral, which is more in the middle here, I'm pretty sure. But either way, Gulf moisture can easily get into the southeast, and of course this is March and April, so mainly the Dixie Alley season. They can get a little more into the plains as you move more forward. But that creates the best risk area for this green area here, and that because that's where all the cold, moist air, cold, dry air, warm, dry air, and then cold, moist air will meet up. And then obviously the jet stream is having these systems here dip more south, and then we could get like sometimes snow up here, but it's like really rare. By this point, the winter season is pretty much ending, and that can be shown here. This is a document from the National Weather Service in Tallahassee, and we see this is more south because this is more for winter and into March. But we can see here that unstable air masses have a much easier time getting into Dixie Alley and the plains, as these La Nina and neutral tracks are more north than these El Nino tracks. Also, we could see a very active tornado season, potentially up towards 14, 15, 1,600 tornadoes, which is above average due to the fact that we're in a La Nina and El Ninos typically get less tornadoes. So in El Nino, as you can see here, there's very rarely any areas that get above average. I mean, Florida, like we saw last year, into southern Georgia, southern Dixie Alley. And then we have all out west. But really, out west doesn't really get that much tornadoes anyway. So La Nina, what we really could see is the highest above average tornadoes, Oklahoma, parts of Texas, and especially Arkansas, especially. So intense tornadoes, EF3 to EF5, and tornado outbreaks into Dixie Alley. I do think what we've seen in recent years, and also what I think it's going to be this year, is it's going to be more of this area instead of just more out into the southern plains, at least for March and April. So what's the high? The Enso phase that gives each of these areas the highest EF1 plus tornadoes. So again, I mean, Texas is going to Oklahoma. I do think we'll see slightly above average, at least for parts of it, but El Ninos typically give them more tornadoes, and we did see a lot there. But clearly here, the hotspot's going to be Arkansas, Louisiana, northern Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and places like that, as it's shown here, because that is, La Nina gives these areas the highest tornadoes. And into the Midwest, which we'll get to in a bit, and even maybe into North Florida, because I feel like the El Nino giving Florida the most tornadoes, that's more of the peninsula. Now we're going to look at more significant tornadoes real quick. So intense F3 to F5, but now EF3 to F5 tornadoes. We see in transitional Nino years, so it goes from a, basically it goes from a, I think it's going into a La Nina. We see high against around Dixie. Let me put somewhere you can see it. That higher tornado counts in Dixie Alley, parts of the plains, but not as much. So mainly it's the Midwest and Dixie Alley here. So say slight northern Florida, but mainly Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, especially Kentucky and Tennessee, which I don't think it will be that far south, because none of these really apply to this year. We're going to be in a pretty transitional La Nina, but it shows how the more significant tornadoes are going to be more east in the years like this, and we see negative Transnino years, it's more west, but I don't think of this year. What really is going to give like a good idea of what this year is going to be like is this graphic on the right. We see here for March La Nina tornado counts, which is where the season gets started, and maybe even neutral. We can see Arkansas, Oklahoma into Dixie Alley is the highest risk. And really, if we keep it a La Nina neutral, I really think we could. It's much more south, North Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and even maybe a bit of South Carolina. So that could be very high risk there. I am having trouble with those. Anyway, fatal tornadoes. We do see here real quick that in a La Nina, we do see a lot more tornadoes, especially more east, my bad. And then El Ninos, we do see a good amount, but we see a lot more longer track tornadoes out in the plains. And neutral, it's kind of all over the place. There's not a lot of neutral tornadoes on here. But then again, it is honestly kind of hard to get to neutral because an El Nino is anything above 0.5. A La Nina is anything below negative 0.5. It's kind of hard to stay in that area. Anyway, let's get through these monthly risks. So as you saw with the tornado outbreak slides I showed you, March tornado risk is going to be a little bit into the southern plains, but for the most part, it's going to be North Florida up to like Kentucky. I do think it'll be a little more south this year, as we saw, if I can go back here. Yeah, as we saw with this March La Nina tornado counts. So that's what it's going to be like. And the highest risk for outbreaks and intense tornadoes of F3 plus. So those risks for March are going to be Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. And as we go into April, the tornado risk extends from South Carolina all the way to Texas. So the main thing is North Florida, Dixie Alley, Arkansas, maybe a little bit into Oklahoma and Texas. But this pink here is the main area. We shift a little bit into parts of Oklahoma and Texas, but I think the main focus for April is going to be around Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. I'm trying to rush through this, guys, because I've already explained everything, and now it's just like telling you what there is. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. But I don't want to waste y'all's time. But anyway, May tornado risk goes into the southern plains. I mean, the main tornado risk still goes into North Florida and Dixie Alley, but that top risk for outbreaks and intense tornadoes goes into the traditional area that could be neutral to above average this year: Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, into Kansas. As we go into June, that shifts more north into the northern central plains and the Midwest. The June tornado risk goes from parts of Texas all the way out to West Virginia, the Minnesota, and North Dakota. But that top risk for outbreaks and intense tornadoes, again, over the central plains, so Kansas, Nebraska, and especially, like we saw in some graphics earlier, Iowa, Illinois, southern Wisconsin, southern Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, get the highest tornadoes in La Nina, so that could be concerning. And then July to August, again, the season calms down. There is still a chance for outbreaks, but it's not as high, so that's why I don't have it on here. It shifts more towards the East Coast and the Midwest, so we can have Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, Pennsylvania, and to, again, back towards the Midwest. But there is still, even if it's not significant tornadoes, there is still a risk. And then finally, the overall seasonal risk of intense EF3 plus tornadoes and our tornado outbreaks, which is 6 to 10 tornadoes plus from a system. Again, I already showed you the month-by-month tornado risk, and that's really all there is to it. But what we really can take a better look at is these tornado outbreaks and the stronger tornadoes. Now, like I showed you earlier, the La Nina gives the most tornadoes to Dixie Alley in the Midwest. So compared to average, Dixie Alley in the Midwest, I think will get the most above average tornadoes. Though the plains are still in this because I still think they get average severe weather, and their average is higher. So that puts them at a similar risk. Anyway, so the lower risks, kind of notable but still lower, is this big circle here. It goes through Florida, parts of the Carolinas into the upper Midwest, but not as much there. But the notable, so this moderate risk is where we really start to get into it. Texas, Louisiana, through Georgia, North Florida, all the way up into central Wisconsin, into just north of Nebraska, so South Dakota. The highest risk, so, as we get into Texas and Oklahoma, Nebraska, we commonly, historically, have seen strong EF3 plus tornadoes there and tornado outbreaks. And that same goes for Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, which are also in this. And then the highest risk, we have two separate risks. So this upper risk here is due to the very above average severe weather and tornadoes that we're going to see in the later tornado season. So Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. And then the highest risk is due to the very above average Dixie Alley severe weather we could be seeing. And also an average to above average plain season, but their average is very high. So Oklahoma, a little bit of Texas, especially Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And this could be extended maybe a little more south and maybe we could cut off this more western part. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, have a great day, guys.